Hey, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. I am Ron Luce, joined tonight by the Juice Man himself, and we are here to talk about, honestly, maybe one of my favorite Cubs wins of the entire season. Cubs walk it off against the Cincinnati Reds, and let's just clear the air right now. Javi Baez, you talk your shit, homeboy, because when you come in off the bench against Amir Garrett, who you've got bad blood with, and walk it off with just an absolute piss missile to center field. It doesn't leave the ballpark, but goes over the head of the center fielder. It didn't matter. Game over. Sayonara. Cubs win. But holy shit, Juice, before we get into this thing, how you feeling, buddy?
Good. Yeah, good to talk about a Cubs win. If I said tonight would be must-see TV, considering that most of these guys may not be in a Cub uniform as early as tomorrow. And as we saw, there was a trade tonight, and Andrew Chafin has moved on to the Oakland A's, and the Cubs got two prospects back in the deal that we'll talk about in a little bit. But, yeah, it was good to see a win, and then the controversy at the end between Javi Baez and Amir Garrett. I think it's safe to say that during the Cubs rebuild, Amir Garrett will not be a part of it. I don't think that there's any good blood on that team. And if some of these guys end up staying, I would be shocked if he ever ends up in a Cub uniform. And it also kind of cues it up for tomorrow's game. Get there early because who knows what's going to happen when any of these guys step to the plate, because that's just something that definitely deserves a retaliation, regardless of how much we enjoyed it as Cubs fans. I'm sure Javi will be going up there in full catcher's gear tomorrow.
Yeah, and quite frankly, I don't blame him but oh man, that was so good. It was so nice, and I'm gonna enjoy sticking that thing on the hat. That's a W flag on the hat for those that are listening on the podcast. But what a fucking game! Like, I am so fired up right now. I got my Javi jersey on. I know it looks weird because everybody's like, "Isn't that an '80s jersey?" Yeah, it is. I got it customized.
Nice.
I'm like that. Leave me alone. If you don't like it, you can at me on Twitter. It's fine. I'm at Luce on Tap on Twitter. Juice said Juice on Tap on Twitter. But holy shit. I mean, what a game. What a game, honestly, because this game was just such an up and down, right? There was so much that went into this game because, the Cubs go up early, big Anthony Rizzo home run, things you love to see. And then the Reds claw their way back. They take the lead. They tie it. Cubs are able to take the lead. The Reds storm back and ultimately eventually take the lead, and they're up 2 runs. I think every Cubs fan at one point when it was 5-3 was like, all right, this game's over. And then, of course, the Andrew Chafin trade rumblings start to come out right at about that time in the game. So everybody's just like, tonight's going to be miserable. Tonight's going to be absolutely, absolutely miserable. And it wasn't, though, because then the Cubs stormed their way back. They clawed back. They fought back. They get that 4th run on the overturned no catch that I don't know why the fuck they called it a catch in the first place. But nonetheless, 5-4 at that point. And then Willie Contreras nuke to tie the game. And then ultimately the Cubs walk it off with Javier Baez pinch hitting and putting it dead center, more or less, right on the warning track. Reds opting to go 5 infielders. I get the strategy at that point in the game, but at that point it didn't fucking matter because Javi hit it so hard. And again, like I said, Javier Baez, you talk your shit, homeboy, because I don't like Amir Garrett either. I haven't. I think any Cubs fan can honestly say they don't like him. A lot of that has to do with him being a Red. Let's be honest. If he was a Cub, we'd probably all love him. It's that energy. And Javi's got that energy. And I love Javi because Javier Baez, as of 11:28 Central Daylight Time on July 26th, is still the Chicago Cubs. So this was a good win. Juice, I mean, obviously, I think every Cubs fan has already mentioned it at least once today. We all know where this week is and what this week means and what this week's probably going to feel like ultimately end of it. And I will sum it up in less than 10 words, and it's going to be a kick in the dick for a lot of people. But it's still super nice to see them walk it off the way they did. It's nice seeing an Anthony Rizzo home run. Sure, Kyle Hendricks struggled tonight. Honestly, probably his worst start since like early
April.
May. Yeah, maybe even late April. I mean, it's been a long time since Kyle hasn't looked that good. So nothing to, I don't think, be concerned about there. But tonight was just a well-needed game, my friend.
Yeah, I mean, I think what you said was kind of spot on in terms of, Amir Garrett and what this week's going to be. It's almost like, you're getting your last chapters, your last memories with some of these guys. And obviously, that could change. Javi Baez could be signed an extension. I know there's been some talks about that. But, early on in the game, you see Anthony Rizzo go yard after Chris Bryant singling. And that's kind of like man, like, is that the last time we see those guys score together? Like you start thinking of these things during the game. And that gets super depressing as you watch the league crumble away. And obviously the Reds have been a thorn in the side no matter what year it is. It seems like even when the Cubs are above the better team, it above and beyond the better team, they still give the Cubs a hard time. It's just a really feisty ball club. It's always seemed to be that way. But yeah, they claw their way back, like you said. And I think the interesting part of the game was, I think it was in the 8th, I think it was the 7th, when they scored runs that after the diving catch, I had tweeted out something along the lines of, it'd be really poetic if Chris Bryant scored from first.
Yeah.
And this was one of the last moments we have, after him scoring twice, on being on the move during, the World Series, Game 7 that won him the World Series. And I don't know about you, and this is a question to anybody who's listening, in the comments as well. And you too, Ron. Are you having a hard time like watching these games as analysts or as fans of the team, strictly because I think it's difficult to separate, and we talked about it yesterday, your head from your heart on this a lot. And I think it's very difficult to, like, you watch tonight's game and I saw the jokes on Twitter, you're almost like, man, like, keep them together. You know what I mean? Yeah. But at the end of the day, you need to understand that there's, at the end of the day, you have to understand that there's 5 years of a case study to look back at where this team hasn't gotten it done. And it's like, I understand tonight's a great win. And obviously you ride the highs and lows of a baseball season. Absolutely. But like with my head, I'm like, okay, like, cool. I try to connect some pieces because obviously Trevor Story exited today's game after being hit in the wrist. And then you look at the trade market there and you go, man, I wonder if what Javi Baez would, command on the trade market now that that's maybe shrunken, because you don't know the state of Trevor Story's injury. So you start to think that way. And then you see Chris Bryant, obviously single and get on base a bunch tonight. And you're like, man, like, and you hear the trade from Chafin and you say, man, if that gets back a top 10 prospect, what does Chris Bryant get you back? Even for a rental, then you start to think, man, Kimbrel comes out, works his way into a jam and then out of a jam. Man, like, maybe that's another one but it's so hard because this all comes together in the bottom of the 9th where Javi Baez walks it off. And you're like, man, like, this is how fun Cubs baseball used to be. Yeah. And it seemed like every game in 2016 that we watched was like that. If they weren't winning by 10, they were coming back to win a ball game. The never say die Cubs is what a lot of people called them in 2016. And I think it's really hard to separate. I know I've been having a real tough time, like, being like, okay, like, I'm going to get up to watch this game, but I have to watch it with like 2 different shades of glasses on, because I have to watch it during the understanding that this is where this team is at in the selling state. And I also have to understand the fact that, like, there's so much to celebrate these guys for, that it is going to be emotional once, like, the chair is lifted from underneath us. Yeah. And I think you get the initial taste during Jack. Like, it was like, okay, we really enjoyed Jack around the ball club for the half of the season.
Yeah, and he wasn't nearly what these
right.
Other guys
and then and then tonight you get like everybody loves, Andrew Chafin, he's the sheriff, like, in the short time he was here, he captivated the fans. And it's like, man, like, that starts to hurt. And then you start to think about, like, what is the feeling that you're going to have when a trade is announced for, like, one of the guys who really meant something for that 2016 run. And I have a really hard time each night watching these games because I keep waiting for the shoe to fall. It's almost like I'm waiting for, the Marquee Network to pan to the dugout to hugs, like, and that's when, like, I don't know how I'll feel. And I know I talked to you last night that I teared up on my way up a little bit. after hearing KB go yard. And I'm like, man, like that it sucks where the team's at, and I get it. Like they're doing it out of the best of the ball club. Like they're not going to contend this year. And just because they trade him doesn't mean they can't go back to him and give him a large deal in the offseason.
Sure.
That's where my head's at. And until he signs a long extension with somebody else, I'll keep believing that that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
But it will feel real, finite when he's in another uniform this year, because there will be that speculation question that at that point, you're just another one of the 32 teams that want to sign this guy.
Yeah. No, 100%. And that's what makes these games so hard to watch this week. Like, I think every Cubs fan came into today, especially after yesterday, like they got a nice win. Everybody contributed. Like all things were fine and dandy. And then Monday happens. And then everybody's just like, well, son of a bitch. Like this week is going to suck. And again, like not to sound terrible, but like this is where a beautiful little glass of whiskey helps, because it's just like, as a Cubs fan, like you said, Juice, these core guys have so many memories with the team. And like people were upset when Jock was traded, and Jock was a fun player for the 7-8 months that he was here. Not even, I guess in totality, maybe it was 6.5, but whatever. Nonetheless, it was awesome seeing him, have fun and be a Cub and enjoy the Wrigley atmosphere. And, he was posting stuff about vibing with Wrigley when it was 100%. And like, everybody's like, yeah, we like Jock. And then they pull the trigger on the trade and you're like, you sons of bitches. Oh, this is going to suck. And he was, like you said, he's not even one of the ones that people have that attachment to, that don't have that. Like, he wasn't a part of that team that literally made you cry with your family members because of a championship. Like we're gonna talk a little personal story here. I cried with my mother and my father the night the Cubs won the World Series. They're both diehard Cubs fans, have been since the day where they were born. I almost tripped and face planted off my bed because I was so excited when that ball hit Rizzo's mitt that night. I was borderline cussing KB out as I saw that ball start to sail high. And I'm like, I had just that immediate change. Like, I remember being on the computer until literally like 2:30 in the morning, ordering Cubs World Series shit with my family because we were all so excited. And it's like you said, Juice, it's trying to remove that heart feeling of this team with that head feeling of being a baseball fan and a critical, somebody that understands the business side of the game. And again, if this team never won a championship, none of us would feel this way.
It'd be easy.
We'd be bummed out. Don't get me wrong. Like I was bummed out to see Derek Lee leave, and I was bummed out to see Aramis eventually leave, and I was bummed out to see Soriano eventually moved off and things like that. But holy shit, when you have that just emotional attachment because of what that 16 team meant to so many people, it does make it that much harder. And then tonight just doesn't make it any better. You know what I mean? Like KB going 2 for 4 with a walk and scoring 2 runs. Anthony Rizzo going deep. Javier Baez coming off the bench to walk it off. Are you fucking kidding me? Like, this is exactly the type of game that, like you said, really does tug on the heartstrings, because you do watch it through 2 different lenses, right? You watch it through the business lens and say, oh yeah, okay. Yeah. These guys are, they're a lot of value. They're going to, if you told me, hey, 2 years from now, this team's going to be right back in contention if they do the right things now. Okay, fine. I'll take the kick in the stomach and we'll go for it. But then you watch that other lens and you say, oh, well, son of a bitch, these are the guys that won the World Series. And I love all of them so much. And I don't want them to be anywhere but Chicago. Like, and it really is such a just downer. And again, there's no guarantee that all of these guys are gone, right? No. I mean, let's preface that right now, because
sure,
there's a lot of reports that, like, I know Buster Olney's preaching that Anthony Rizzo is going to be a Red Sox, and then like every other insider's like, you're high out of your fucking mind because he's probably not going anywhere. And I think that's kind of how it's going to be ultimately for Javi and Rizzo, at least for the rest of the season. Obviously, when the offseason comes around, things can happen, things that we can't control. But realistically, KB's gone. Andrew Chafin is on his way out tonight, and we're unfortunately going to talk about that a little bit here in a few minutes to damper the mood just a smidge, which sucks that it had to happen on a night like tonight after this kind of win. But guys like Tepera, guys like Kimbrel, potentially Davies. Like there's a lot of other names that could be moved this week. So it is that really like it's almost like this week for Cubs baseball is the epitome of Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde.
Yeah.
It's literally what it is because like you have the wins and the walk-off and Javi, and it's like, yes, this team is awesome. And then you look at the same time and you're like, oh, that's right, Andrew Chafin got traded mid-game and it's just not official yet because they're still fucking playing. And
Right.
oh, the sell-off's coming. Like everybody knows it's coming. Again, it's like, you know what it's the equivalent of? It is the equivalent of when you're 6 years old and you fear needles. At least this was me personally. And you knew you had to like go get like a flu shot or like one of the shots for school when you're younger, the measles and all that crazy bullshit. And like it's the morning of, and you know what's coming at like 3:45 in the afternoon, but you were just so miserable about it for the entire day. And like you want to still have a good day, and like you do have a good day naturally, because why wouldn't you? And then you're like, oh, this was such a great day. And then, 3:25 rolls around and you go, oh, son of a bitch, I don't want to do this. Like, that is literally what this week feels like.
I think I relate it more to like when you're at a buddy's house and you're standing outside the pool and you won't get in because you don't want to get wet. So one splashes you. To me, that's Jock, hitting you. And then there's another splash. And then eventually somebody who you didn't even know was there pushes you into the pool. Like, I feel like that's how this is going to be. It's going to be more or less small trade. And then the day of the deadline, it'll be everybody gets pushed in the water.
Yeah.
And that's how all of this ends. And I hope that that's the case, because I think for our sake, that'll be way better than – it's almost like in the quote Moneyball, like we have been back and forth, when he's firing the player, letting the player go, would you rather be, shot in the stomach and bleed out, or shot in the head,
bullet to the head and end it right
there. And end it right there, and it's almost like I feel like that's a lot of like where we're at. But I think tonight's game kind of, there's a lot of good to pick from it in terms of the future, because you look at somebody like Keegan Thompson, who works himself into a jam and then is able to pull himself out of it. That is experience that, no matter if he's a starter or a high leverage bullpen arm, I don't know what their plan is for him in the future.
Absolutely.
But with that said, that's experience. And that experience is something that I think we need to start looking for at Cubs on Tap here. And if you're a fan, that's what you're going to have to watch for post-trade deadline. Whoever they bring up, you're going to have to start to look at, the success that they've had, little things in these games that you can point to kind of talk yourself into this team's much closer to contending than we think, because there's guys like Keegan Thompson who are learning. They're getting into, these jams, and they're able to work themselves out. And I think that that'll be the moment of the ball game that isn't talked about as much as obviously Javi's or, the Willie, home run to tie it up. But I thought that was the key point in the ball game, strictly because if he doesn't work his way out of that, what happened? You don't even get to Kimbrel, and you don't even get to, it's, to me, I feel like when a game is on the line and it's closer like that, at bats feel more real to hitters as well. So when it's that close, maybe you don't get the rally. Maybe some of these guys, because they are trading, they check out. And, you don't go home with a dub. But I thought that was the most important part of it, because you expect Craig Kimbrel to work out of a jam like he did, and you don't expect that from somebody like Keegan Thompson, who is clearly learning. He's got great stuff, and he just needs to put the pieces together in terms of, the mental aspects and sequencing his pitches the correct way. And I thought that's one of those steps tonight that I wrote a little mental note. Like, that's one of those that for the future we need to find. And even win or lose, we'll have those things to talk about. Absolutely. And I think that's, moments in tonight's game that, warrant more discussion in the future now, because it's clear we're not trying to win the division this year. We're obviously within a quick rebuild. And Keegan Thompson seems like he's going to be a major, contributor in the future, no matter if it's out of the pen or as a starter. And that's growth. And anytime you can see growth in terms of a younger guy, it really makes you feel excited for the future. And there hasn't been a lot to be excited about for the future lately.
Yeah, well said. And honestly, I really do agree with you about that Keegan Thompson moment tonight because, I was sitting there. I remember, sitting watching the game, manning the Cubs on Tap account tonight. And I'm just like, oh, fuck, here we go again. You know what I mean? Like, it's just something that's going to ruin the mood tonight. Like, they tie it up. And, the Reds are going to find their way to just win this game or just squeak out one run, and like the Cubs will make it interesting and it's not going to matter. And like you said, that moment of maturity for Keegan Thompson tonight to load the bases and then work your way out of that jam the way he did. And then, of course, end it with a big high leverage strikeout too. So that way he just walks off the mound just screaming and yelling and shit. And everybody's screaming and yelling. I know Cody is in the left field bleachers at that moment just saying every cuss word that's in the book because I was too. And I was sitting on my little chair in my bedroom. Like, just what a moment. And it's just like, wow. Like you said, like it really is that moment of like, you think about the future of this team and sure, there's going to be a lot of changes here in the next week, but you still sit there and go, son of a bitch. Like they're still better off than most teams that are quote unquote selling right now. Like they're in a better position. They really are. Like they're not the Pittsburgh Pirates. They're not the Minnesota Twins. They're not, I don't even know. The garbage seller of the AL East. I guess that's the Baltimore Orioles. But again,
Yeah.
they're not those teams. They're not these teams that are sitting there going, we're 5 years away. No, realistically, if they play their cards correctly, even with moving pieces and doing whatever they decide to do here in the next literally under 200 hours, they're still, they're maybe a year and a half, 2 away. From truly being like at least enough of a juggernaut to like make some noise again. And it's at least refreshing knowing that because I feel like again, I think this is fair for all Cubs fans. I'm not sitting here calling anybody out about anything, whatever. I'm not one of those type of people, but I get the whole like feeling like the world's ending right now because it really does feel that way. Change sucks. Let's go down to the core principles of being a person, let alone being a Cubs fan, especially after a Cubs fan after you've seen success for the first time in 108 years. Change sucks. People don't like change. Change is necessary, but nobody likes it. It really is that way. And so, you see how that plays out tonight and you wonder, how that is. And going back to Keegan Thompson, like Joey says here in the comments, without Keegan Thompson, the Cubs don't win tonight. I agree. If that's Dylan Maples working himself into a bases loaded jam like that, the Cubs probably lose tonight. Keegan Thompson put his meat on the fucking table and doing what he did tonight is massive, like you said, for his own development. And then just for the Cubs in general, because even in a quote unquote lost season, even in a quote unquote, maybe that's not his role in the future as an eighth inning guy, whatever. That experience that he got tonight and helping them win a ball game like they did is only going to help him. And going back to Joe's comment from way earlier, poetry in motion, like that's really what tonight's game felt like. Because like Juice, like you said, in the wake of what's going on, I feel like poetry is a perfect example of how tonight's game was. Like that is my analogy for tonight's game. Tonight's game was poetry because in poetry, it's not all unicorns and rainbows. It's emotional. It's going to hit you. It's going to make you think. It's going to make you consider things. And that's kind of what tonight's Cubs game was. It made you really think about the future of this team while still thinking about the present, while still reflecting on the past and being appreciative of it. And so it's like, holy shit, this walk-off win in wake of what's about to happen in the next 5 days, it was almost necessary just from the standpoint of getting Cubs fans a moment to sit there and go, this team's pretty fucking awesome. And this team is pretty sensational, even in wake of what they're doing this season. The memories, the current state of the team, like there's a lot of pieces that look forward. And then the future of this team, because you sit here and you think about those guys that are in the minors right now. This Cubs team, especially ever since they brought Kantrovitz over, it really feels like that the minor league stock of this team is rising. Brennan Davis at the end of the season is going to be a top 20 prospect in baseball. He's already coming out on most of these new polls for anybody that's not the MLB. He's at least a top 30 guy on, I think, every single one of them. He's as high as 17 on Fangraphs.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think this week's gonna suck. This is gonna be the brunt of the hurricane, the eye of the storm, whatever the hell you want to call it. But when the damage is done, when the weather passes, whatever you want to use your analogy to be to get through it, I think a lot of people are going to feel much better about this team after this week than we all do right now. And
I think so too.
And it's still going to suck. Again, poetry. It's still going to suck. There's always, it's a story. It's a beautiful novel, right? Like, you get to that point in the story where you go, I don't like this anymore. Why does it have to happen like this? But then you hope once you get past that part and you roll into the ending of whatever, this season becomes, and then hopefully into next season, we all sit here as Cubs fans and go, okay, maybe we aren't so bad after all.
Yeah, and I think that to build on that, it then gives David Ross a new direction on what he needs to be doing for the second half. It's his job to go up to Keegan Thompson after tonight's game and to say, hey, listen, we don't win that game without you. Yeah. I need that from you. And if we're going to be successful in the future, I need this from you. I need you to be able to be that guy, no matter if you're, you work yourself into a jam as a starter and you work your way out of it, or if you're a high leverage bullpen guy. There's going to be some times in the future here in the second half where, maybe he uses them that way just to get him that experience and see how he can work his way out. He's a big fan of throwing relievers into the fire and seeing what they got.
Yeah.
There's no better way to do it in the second half when there's no expectations. So I think it kind of gives David Ross some more direction too, because I think that in a lot of ways it was tough for him this year to manage strictly because there's two schools of what were going on. There's the ownership side of it where if they didn't overperform, there's a lot of pressure on that. They were not going to buy. It was just kind of a given. And the other side of it was, well, you need to get some of these guys ready, for the future. Your Nico Horners, your Keegan Thompsons, your, Justin Steeles. I think that's the hard part as a manager to play that seesaw game of you have players on this roster with expectations to win a World Series every single year. And you also have, this management in the middle of it saying we need to taper expectations because we think we're pretty far away from winning a World Series. And I think that came into a lot of it. And also the business side of it, who's standing over them saying, hey, listen, this isn't just, a free checkbook for us to run around crazy and do things because we over-leveraged ourselves. So I think it was really hard to be David Ross this year because then the other side of it is you need to manage the younger guys to get them ready for the future. And I think that's a tough juggling act for him to play, and all while he's still learning as a manager too. That's a lot of, we've seen some bad David Ross lately, and I've seen it in the comments. I've seen it on Twitter, and that's true. He's made some moves that have, blown up in his face, but we also have to remember he's not going anywhere. He's a part of this rebuild. He's a guy that they believe in because he's strictly a player's coach. He's a guy that seems to get, the best out of his players, and maybe the front office just thinks that they need just a change in scenery for a lot of these guys, strictly because maybe that message that he's been trying to get across, they're trying to do that, but they're just not. They don't have the skill set. It's hard to. At this point, Anthony Rizzo, Chris Bryant, Wilson Contreras, Javi Baez, they are who they are. You're not coaching anything different into them. And I think It's been clear that the problem isn't all of these guys. It's a few of them. It's all of them together. Mm-hmm. It's a matter of a few of them work. All of them together are just too similar of a type of hitter for the lineup for it to be successful. And that's why they failed and they started to struggle when the same guys who are contributing, your Duffys, your Bodies, Nico Horner, all the guys we just named right there are all on-base contact guys. And when you don't have that backing at the bottom of the lineup to get on for those guys like Rizzo, like Bryant, like Javi Baez to just mash with runners on base, it's really hard to win when you're just hitting the solo home run, and that's coming, very scarcely, like it did for the span of 30 games when they went 10 and 19, and what did they? No, it was even worse, like 10 and 30. Yeah, so I mean, it's I think tonight was fun just strictly because I think it's redemption for the Cubs in terms of the whole Amir Garrett, and I know we haven't really touched on that yet, but it was a fun night just to watch from all different angles, because I think that you could really pull a lot of great stuff out of tonight's game, and there's probably things that happened that I didn't catch. It's strictly because there was just so much going on between the trade, between you're watching Keegan Thompson, and there's so many different angles and guys are at different stages of being a Cub that I think it's really difficult to watch as a fan. And I think that it was kind of good to end on a win, because it's almost like all of everything that happened, you're watching that through the lens, different lenses, like we were talking about. Right. At the end of it ended with Cub fans going home with a smile, with a guy that maybe made his last memory as a Cub, which I think is something that I truly enjoyed tonight's game for that.
Absolutely. And Schwartzy jumped in our comments earlier talking about a 6-pack of lenses for a fan to view their team through as an article idea, Juice. So you and I might have to collab on that. But going back to what you mentioned about David Ross, I think this is critically important to everybody. And I want to congratulate David, because tonight marks, if we include playoffs, he's over the mark, just barely by one game. Congratulations, David Ross. You're officially a second-year manager by game count. Managed his 163rd game tonight. Yeah. And that should tell people something. He managed 62 last year, 60-game regular season, 2-game playoff. Tonight was game 101. It's 163. It's officially in year 2. He is still a rookie manager. He's going to make mistakes. He's going to fuck up. Shit happens. I mean, you look at every great manager, they mess up. It happens. People are human. Tony La Russa is a Hall of Famer, and he still is making mistakes at 70, whatever the fuck years old he is. Like, that's just the nature of the beast. And, for him, to be in the situation that he's in is definitely a very unique situation for a manager. You're very new. You come into a contending team, which most new managers don't come into. I mean, let's be honest. And now you have to kind of go through that. Okay, we're going through a transition. Like, this team's going to look different. Those guys that you played with on that 2016 team, some of them will be gone. Like, it's just the nature of the beast. It is what it is. Take it for what it is. But I think overall he's handling it well, right? I mean, this team could have easily just said, you know what, fuck this. They could have sat everybody important. We could have seen Ortega, Wisdom, and Hap as the 2, 3, 4 hitters every day if they really wanted to go that direction, but they're not. And I think a lot of that does have to do with Ross. And sure, again, he's going to make mistakes. And I think if we all look in the freaking mirror and say, oh, do I make a mistake? Yeah, we do. Especially when you're under pressure, you always make mistakes. Like, he's young in sense of being a manager. Things are going to happen. He needs to learn, right? And the way you learn is you do dumb shit. You go back to talking about Joe Madden. Everybody was always like, Joe, where did you establish your crazy style and everything? And he's like, because I had hundreds of games as a minor league manager to fuck up and nobody cared because it wasn't in the national spotlight. Mm-hmm. Ross didn't have that.
Nope.
Ross literally got thrown into the fire as an MLB manager.
It's like, go win a World Series.
Yeah. It was like, hey, thanks for helping us win the 2016 World Series. Thanks for being a part of our front office for a couple of years. Hey, we're going to throw you into the fire at the major league level and expect you to do great. Like, holy shit. And overall, he's done pretty fucking good. Like,
also, we're going to do that during a pandemic, which was probably nearly impossible for most managers to handle in a given year, too, even if you're not expecting to win a world championship.
Exactly. And so for the fact that he's done what he's done, given the amount of mistakes that he's made overall, I think he's done a really good job. And I think people could back off him, and they won't because that's just people, and I get it. It's whatever. But overall, I think we can all say, like, hey, he's in a very unique situation. And at the end of the day, I think this situation is going to make him a better manager because of all the shit he has to manage this season. That hopefully, in a couple of years from now, when this team is, I would imagine, a contender again, he's in a perfect situation to be that guy. And who knows? Maybe 15, 20 years from now, we're looking at him like a Joe Girardi. Like, wow, he was a really good fucking manager. You know what I mean? And it's, it's one of those things that, we'll see what happens. And Joey jumped in the comments here and said Ross is the punching bag that the Ricketts should be. Excuse me. And it's like, and even then, like, I think Juice, I know you and I have talked at nauseum, the Juice and Luce show. We're always on top of it about, the Ricketts and that situation and things like that. But I think overall, it's just, it's, if we're being entirely honest, and this is just going to kind of sum up my thoughts in terms of the whole situation. Everybody knew 2021 was a very pivotal year for the current Cubs core. As soon as 2016, we knew that. None of us projected a fucking pandemic. None of us projected the seasons that were 18, 19, and 20. Like, none of us projected what was going to happen. So, of course, the narrative changes over time. Of course, things change. Of course, shit happens. Of course, the Cubs go over budget on the business side of the house and, cry poor and whatever you want to call it. None of us could have expected this 2021 decision to be what it has become. Yeah. And I think it's like, can we really blame one specific person? No.
No,
cumulation of things.
I think you're also working with a lack of information too. If they play a full season last year, maybe this gets weeded out more than, the 60 quick games that they played last year. Whatever Absolutely. Was it? Yeah, 60, right? While I agree with the sentiment of what's going on with a lot of fans for the Ricketts, I won't jump on board that bandwagon until they don't buy next year.
Yes.
I can live with them wanting to be I can live with them wanting to be the owners that want to change it up. That went to Jed and said, hey, make this your thing now that Theo's gone. And if this is coming from Jed in terms of like some things, some guys want to be, he wants extended, some he doesn't, and this is just how he's going to make up the ball club, sure. But I won't jump on that bandwagon until we go through how much payroll is being cut off at the end of this year and then don't buy again. Because based on the situation that they're in, they have to sell. And honestly, the prospect, they could easily double dip and sign a lot of these guys back that they feel like they want to while stocking the farm system, while adding different parts cheaper. I mean, I think that's been kind of lost in the translation of what's going on with this Cubs team, because they're in a position where they literally can't go for it. They haven't played well enough to do it. And if you ever were going to reset, the farm system and the team, it's with the value of the guys that they have. And as much as I want Chris Bryant back, I do. But I'm the type of guy who wants them to double dip right now, considering that where they're at. I want them to trade Chris Bryant for a prospect and let him play for 3 months somewhere else. But when, the money comes on the table and somebody has to go all in for Chris Bryant, I want the Cubs to be the ones that do it. And I think that that's how, as a fan now, I look at it. I do think it becomes more difficult once he moves to a different team and has that rapport with another franchise. Let's say he goes to like the Giants, like we talked yesterday, and he can sit and, make the pitch that, hey, we'll pay you this, and you could be the star, the pillar that, leads us into maybe the next great Giants run. It'd be really tough to pass up if you're Chris Bryant. Yeah. I mean, the weather's beautiful out there. That's tough. But if he truly wants to be in Chicago and the Cubs truly want to pay him the money he deserves, they could be at that table and be the toppest bidder, the highest bidder, and come home with a top 10, top 5 prospect from somebody's, farm system, and be back to contend again with the same guy in a Cubs uniform. And you're looking back laughing, 5-7 years from now, like, hey, remember when we traded Chris Bryant and we got back so-and-so ends up being, an NL Cy Young Award winner or, an MVP candidate in the field. And you're like, yeah, we did all that and we suffered for, the 1 year that we had to do that for. And that's when I'll start to be mad at the Ricketts, when the money comes off the payroll at the end of this year and they don't spend. And I will be shocked if that's the case. Shocked. I'll be utterly shocked.
Yeah. And I think I will too. I'm right there with you. I mean, I think the best part about this whole episode is like we haven't even gotten into the weeds of the Andrew Chafin trade. And you know what? I'm kind of okay with that. I think for those that haven't seen it, the Cubs got the 9th prospect in the A's system, as well as the guy that's just outside the top 30. Juice and I were talking about that before we jumped on.
Yeah, I added more to this after I had just seen he throws between 97 to 99. Mm-hmm. Was topping into triple digits as early as last year. Made his way to low single A in June. Only has pitched around like 12 games or 12 innings or something around there. But they like his arm, and he needs to develop a secondary pitch, and that sounds perfect for Pitch Lab for me. That's just my opinion. I think that that's a real good low A prospect to work with, and they obviously got an on base guy in what's his name, Deichmann.
Deichmann, yeah. Like you and I joked. I mean, literally, folks. For those that didn't know, obviously we talk during games, and we're all going back and forth here at Cubs on Tap. Juice and I think we exchanged the gif of Billy Bean, Brad Pitt, looking at Jonah Hill. Why do we like him? Because he
gets on base.
I think we exchanged that about 15 times in a span of about an hour.
We did.
Like we were, because again, he's what, a 432 on base percentage right now at AAA.
Yeah.
Holy shit.
With very isolated power, if they can figure out a way to harness that with his walk rate and his on base percentage and his swing, I think you're looking at a guy that's real high reward for them. And for, like you said, for Chafin, I mean, the guy was an add-on. We were hoping he was going to be somebody who you could just hand the ball, and he turned into, this great 7 or 8 inning guy, 7th, 8th inning guy that, you could hand the ball to those innings and felt confident.
Yeah. For
the Cubs to get a really solid, low A prospect, a guy that, if they can figure out a second pitch, could be something. He's a starter, if I'm not mistaken. I think he was a starter. But throws 100. He's just got some. He's got a great fastball. Just needs to work on the secondary stuff. With those guys, mostly 9 times out of 10, it's control issues. So my bet would be that's the struggle that they'll have to deal with. But they firmly believe in Pitch Lab, and then you end up getting a really high on base percentage guy who mashes, and that's the way baseball is now, right? Ball go far, team go far, and they'll figure out a way to try to isolate his power. And if they can, then you're looking at a huge return for a guy that you really, it was just an add-on to your roster. It's a great start for the Cubs for, their trade deadline as of right now, and obviously, them adding Ball, the first baseman, was a decent start as well, because there's not much depth at the first base position down in the minors. Yeah. So far, Jed seems to be packing some boomer bust talent, which I kind of like, and I think one of the things that we need to kind of, talk to ourselves about and taper our expectations. We got to remember these minor leaguers lost so much time last year that I see a lot with people complaining he's 26. Well, yeah, essentially through the MLB time, he's 25. Right. And he's 24. He just turned 26 too. So,
it's really he's like more 24 than he is 26.
Yeah. So you look at the timeline for these guys. He's already in AAA. It seems like he's He's got a good command of the strike zone. That's a lot of the things that are really tough to teach. And now I think the Cubs get their hands on him. They can figure out a way to, get that power, like I said, isolated. And then, maybe he's driving balls out of the ballpark at Wrigley one day. But it's just a great start for the Cubs. You're looking at a team right now that's mid-pack for the farm system. By the end of this, they could really look at themselves in the top 10 if they play their cards right. And then that's when you get excited because there's a lot of back talent that's kind of wind up here. You got a lot of guys projected for 24, maybe 25 coming up. If you can start adding some MLB almost ready talent, then you have a real full farm system in terms of guys who are ready to come up and contribute now. And, once those guys, you figure out if they can stick or go, you got that back end, your mini A-Rods down there who are going to take a while, your Howards down there that are going to take some time to develop, as much as he's raking and playing good defense, it's going to be at least another year before we can see that guy at the major league level based on, he's going to have to learn a lot to work with the bat. So I think that tonight was a win-win-win for the Cubs, right? You win a ball game, you trade a guy that you really, have use for maybe in the future, but you didn't give up too much to get him. And, you just kind of stocked the farm system with some guys that, are going to be more projectable in the future. You get a guy that maybe can contribute as early as maybe the second half of this season. We start to see him, in left field, considering who they trade or what, they're going to use for the future here and get him some MLB at bats. So it'll be interesting to see how that trade pans out because it's always the dumb ones, right? It's always you're trading Scott Feldman for, and then you end up getting,
Scott Feldman and Steve Clevenger for Jake Arrieta.
Yeah, it's the dumb ones like that make a ball club. So hopefully it's one of those between, them trading Jock and them trading Andrew Chafin already. Hopefully one of those guys were talking about, hey, remember when we were sitting here talking about Cubs on tap and they traded Jock Peterson. We got back that first base kid, and now the DH is here, and he's hitting 30 bombs and walking all the time. Yeah, it's win-win. Let's hope that the Cubs get some return on that.
Yeah, and an interesting question here too from Peter Zeikis here. Who do the Cubs call up for Chafin's spot? I think that's a good question. I mean, I would imagine it's going to be another relief pitcher. Maybe it's Rowan Wick. Maybe they activate Rowan Wick. I know they were talking about him throwing a simulation game. I don't know if he actually did yet. But even then, maybe in the meantime, it's a guy like Trevor Meagle, somebody that's already been on the roster.
If you look towards the bottom of the system, you're not really looking at the timeline for Burl Caraway yet. I don't know if you've peeked his stats yet. He's having a hard time throwing strikes down in South Bend. Same thing with Jensen too. I mean, not that he's probably closer than Burl is, but with that said, he's also kind of still figuring his stuff out. I think that the roster spot that gets put up, Rowan Wick's probably a good, but I think there's going to be a lot of trades within the time. This may be just a temporary spot until maybe they trade a starter, and then we were talking about last night, maybe they go to a 6-man rotation to get guys like Keegan Thompson and Justin Steele some starts. And I think that for the second half, we'll see a lot of that. In that process, too, you protect Kyle Hendricks' arm. Yeah, Dakota Meeks, I would love that, too. Mm-hmm. Or Meckes, is his name Meckes?
It's Meeks, yeah, Dakota Meeks.
Whatever.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think we do eventually see Meeks. I think to Peter's question here, I think what we're going to see this week is guys, just like you said, temporarily being called up for a couple of days, just kind of be a warm body on the roster. Once the roster shakes out and the deadline comes and goes, then we'll truly know who's going to be on this roster for the rest of the season to get looks, right? It'll be Justin Steele. It'll be, Keegan Thompson. It'll be maybe a Dakota Meeks. It'll be, maybe it is an Ian Miller. I know Peter just jumped in the comments again.
Yeah,
those guys are probably all going to get maybe a couple of looks. There's going to be the guys you will truly be able to understand who this team likes going forward or wants to see more of based on who gets called up and sent down over the next, 65 to 100 days of baseball.
Yeah, based on what's in the pen now, too, I'd imagine you'll see a lot of Dylan Maples second half of the year. They got to figure out, if he's worth keeping. I say no, but I mean, they're going to give him every chance while they're not contending to.
I say I agree.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different ways they can, and there's a lot of guys down there now that are depth that maybe you promised a chance to show something, and maybe those guys don't end up on your roster. Maybe they end up on another MLB team as depth for next year. Again, Jake Arrieta will be coming back too eventually. Who knows what they're going to do with him?
And
they're not just
they
going
want to get a look at him too. So
yeah, they're not. I mean, it's Jake Arrieta. They're not just going to let him sit on the bench for the rest of the year. I mean, he's a guy that sells a ticket for you to come and see. Regardless of how bad he pitches. I mean, it is a 2016, World Series guy who was, maybe the second half of the year turns into the Jake Arrieta retirement tour. I mean, it would be not worth watching on the field wise, but I mean, there'd be some sentimental value to it. But
sure,
that's kind of how I see the back half of the year kind of turning out, and there'll be a lot of guys. I think that they'll rotate guys up and down a lot. We're going to see a lot of, AAA, AA guys getting some looks that maybe are older arms that have been in the system for a while. There'll be a lot of good stories for JD and Boog to come out and talk about, this guy's from Podunk, who knows? And, he's been in the Cub system for a while getting his chance. But that's what happens when you're a middling team. You got to figure out what's in that system, what you can keep, what you can move on from. And there'll be a lot of up and down. I think the bus on the way from Iowa and from Tennessee will be working extra hours, I think.
Oh yeah, 100%. They'll be what the Ricketts don't want to spend on the team currently, they'll be spending in transportation fees for a lot of these prospects the rest of the season. One quick thing here. Amir is not happy apparently with Baez, and this is coming from Peter here via the postgame show. Says that Baez never touched first base. I think he's really salty, and what,
I would be too.
True. All I say is I don't like Amir Garrett. I'm glad that tonight ended up the way it did, just for sake of my own stroke of my fandom, I guess. And that's kind of my closing thought on this game. Is there's a lot of shit that happened tonight, the Chafin trade. Knowing what's going to happen in the future, holding on to the past, seeing who's still here, a part of this core for the next core. There's a lot of shit going on.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of my closing thought. So, Juice, I'll turn it quickly back over to you. Any final thoughts on this game before we go ahead and look forward to Tuesday's matchup?
Yeah, said it early on in the podcast. Get there early tomorrow because there may be a brouhaha in the first or second inning. It's coming.
Yeah, and Peter agrees with you. He says, I expect a brawl tomorrow, Cubs-Reds. Yep, probably. There probably will be. And you know what? I am here for it, as long as nobody gets punched in the face and breaks like an eye socket or something that's tradable.
That'd be so Cub, right?
Oh, that would be Cub. That would be Cub, and that's why I'm hoping it doesn't happen. But nonetheless, I like fireworks. Fireworks are fun. Antics are fun, and so if that ends up happening,
maybe Dylan Maples and Amir Garrett can just box, the winner take all. Like I could care less what happens to him from here on out. So
beautiful. I'm here.
And that'd be a good way for him to cement some future career. I know I said that they're going to give him every chance, and they're gonna because they're just going to need arms,
right?
But he can contribute that way. Maybe they just line him up. We'll get Bruce Buffer out there and. Joe Rogan will be interviewing whoever's on the ground after. It'll be an interesting sight. Sell tickets for it.
I can't say what I want to say because Bruce Buffer will flex his trademark and make us pay millions of dollars for saying what I want to say. But you get it. You know where I'm going with this. Hey, who knows? Fuck it. Why not? Ultimately, unfortunately, tomorrow's probably a meaningless game for maybe both of these teams. But we'll still enjoy it and we'll still love it. Here at Cubs on Tap, and hopefully Cubs fandom will feel the same way. But Juice, as you mentioned, we'll go ahead and look forward to tomorrow. The Cubs and the Reds are back at it again at 7:05 on July 27th at beautiful Wrigley Field. The Reds, same thing that we said, before this game. W700. Bally Sports Ohio is where you can listen and watch respectively. And the usual suspects in Chicago, 670 The Score, WRTO 1200, and Marquee Sports Network. Pretty intriguing pitching matchup, actually. A pair of righties going tomorrow. Vladimir Gutierrez is going for the Reds. He's 4-3 on the season, just shy of a 5 ERA. He's 4.97 on the year and 37 Ks. Had a couple of really nice games. I will admit, I would know he was on my fantasy team getting me some points. It was good stuff. Until he started to suck, and then I dropped him. So hopefully he continues to suck because I don't care anymore. And then Adbert Alzolay will be on the mound for the Cubs. Admittedly, I don't think his record is at all indicative of how he's pitched this year. He's 4-10. I don't think that's indicative of how he's pitched, but he has a 4.58 ERA and 91 Ks on the year. So, Juice, I will turn it back over to you, sir. What do you expect from tomorrow's game? Give us a little bit of a preview, and a fly the W pick will be greatly appreciated before we go ahead and close this thing out.
Yeah, it's one of the starts to get up for, right? Adbert Alzolay is going to be a future pillar for this team as you hope for this rotation. And, I'm hoping to see growth, same growth that you saw from Keegan Thompson tonight. I think that's the key. That's what we need to look at as Cub fans from here on out. I'm going to go with a Cubs win tomorrow. I do think that they win again. I think Adbert shows how good he's going to be because – just seems like, he's been really solid late, but he hasn't had like that great start where you go, man, like this kid started, but he's due. He's great. He's due for a really solid start. I'll take, but I remember if I had to pick a player, it would be Adbert Alzolay. But like I said, in honor of Chris Bryant, until he is traded, I'm taking Chris Bryant as my fly the W player of the game for each and every game from here on out until they can figure out where he's going. And then from then on, I'll start picking again for real. But yeah, like I said, get there early. I'm glad, Peter, who you put up on the board. Remember, I don't ever look at the comments.
Yeah.
I just do the show. Says that, there's going to be a brawl tomorrow. I agree. Get there early, get your popcorn ready. Don't miss first pitch because pretty sure you'll see some fireworks early in this one. And also to touch on that, if he never touched first base, he still scores. It's a single, and as long as the guy touched second base and no one's out anywhere around the base, there's one out. So it really doesn't matter if he touched first base or not. By all means, the center fielder can throw the ball to the first baseman, there can be an out there. As long as the guy from second touched second and the guy from third touched third, and obviously whoever scored, I forgot who was even on third at that point, touches home, it doesn't matter. Just one more out. Okay, so
doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's a clown comment from a clown guy, and that's my take on Amir Garrett for tonight.
I like the little bit of flair there at the end, Juice. I appreciate that. Yeah, man, I'm right there with you. I'm hoping for a Cubs winner tomorrow. Obviously, again, amid all the bullshit that's going to happen this week, it's still nice to see them win, especially against the Reds, because I hate the Reds. The only thing I like about the Reds is Nicholas Castellanos. Let's be entirely fucking honest with ourselves. He is the only thing about that franchise that I actually give half of a shit about. And when he's back in a Cubs uniform next year, when he opts out and re-signs with the Cubs in the offseason, I can wear my jersey again that's sitting in my closet. I'll be a happy human. But until that happens, fuck the Reds. Would love to see them get close and not make the playoffs because it would just be poetic. And I'm right there with you, man. It'll be interesting to see. I love the KB pick. I'm gonna go rational tomorrow. Not because I feel like being an asshole. I'm just because this guy's been hot too, and I feel like he needs to get a little credit where credit is due. David Bodie's been really good since he came off the IL.
Yeah,
and
which I'm surprised. Shoulder injury and all, and he's still it seemed like quick recover.
Yeah, and he looks good. And he's 1 for 2 off of Gutierrez with a home run. So I'm gonna take David Bodie. He had a RBI tonight.
It's a good one.
A home run after yesterday's game that you and I recapped. So instead of David Banner, it's gonna be David Bodie. And I'm gonna ask you if you ever seen the Chevy with the butterfly doors.
Of course.
But I'm gonna take David Bodie for tomorrow's game as my fly the W player. But again, the KB pick, always beautiful. And let's be honest, anybody on this Cubs roster at this point is beautiful. I will say, and this one's going to probably sting just a smidge for those that listen, because they know. And I'm sorry, Cody. but Cody's actually going to have to pick a Fly the W player now.
Yeah, I didn't
Every
even
show.
think of that.
And like it actually means something because he can't just fall back on Andrew Chafin, which is very upsetting. It's sad. I'm certainly not a fan of it. I know he's not. I know you're not. But we're at that time of the year, folks. It's gonna be a lot of shit we don't like. Let's be honest. So, Juice, what do you say we close this thing down? I'll do my best pet Sajak, and then we'll get out of here.
I'm good with that. We'll row our way out, pun intended. I know Javi Baez was doing that in his in his celebration tonight, the little row action. So we'll row our way out of here.
We'll roll our way out of here and remind you that Cubs on Tap is the official Cubs podcast, the On Tap Sports Network. You can go ahead and check out all of our great stuff, www.ontapsportsnet.com, at OnTapSportsNet on social media. You can follow the pod-specific accounts. We are at Cubbies, that's Cubbies on Tap. That's both Twitter and Instagram. I am at Luce on Tap on Twitter. Juice is at Juice on Tap on Twitter. And all of our other great panelists and contributors here at Cubs on Tap, at Cody on Tap, at Joe Maris, at Marty Laval, at the Riot 326, which is Joey Ricotta, and so many more that help do so many good things for us here with the Cubs side of things. And we don't only have good Cubs coverage, ladies and gentlemen. We have Bears, we have Bulls, we have Blackhawks. All three of those teams, off-season, training camp, whatever it is, it's starting to ramp up. And yes, Cubs fans, we hate it. We all know we do. But we all have friends that are White Sox fans. You go ahead and bring them over to us as well because the Sox on Tap guys do an excellent job covering the Southsiders. So we have all of your Chicago sports needs covered over at www.ontapsportsnet.com and at OnTapSportsNet on social media. The OnTap Sports Network. Go ahead and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. Whew, not too bad. Hey, we'll get there eventually. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us. This has been a hell of a show. There was a lot to unpack tonight. It's always a pleasure when it is the Juice and Luce show here at Cubs on Tap. Juice, what do you say, buddy? We get out of here without further ado, and the only way we know how.
Fuck Amir Garrett.
And let's go Cubbies.